Goandayin from Keswick Village. This is the Rorschach Arctic Update from the 19th of November 2024. A quick summary of what's going down north of the Arctic Circle. In a moment, sure to reverberate around Indigenous communities worldwide, on Tuesday the 12th, the Norwegian Parliament issued an official apology to the Sami, Forest Fens, and Kvens communities in Norway for the government's centuries of forced assimilation policies. The apology came after a report was published by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission last year, detailing the harmful extent of Norway's history of cultural erasure among the country's indigenous population. The whole parliament backed the apology, except for the right-wing Progress Party. Still, the government promised annual reports on the work it is doing for indigenous peoples and national minorities. The Canadian Arctic is undergoing big changes too. As reported by news agency Arctic Today on Friday the 15th, the Canadian government reacted to the news of the incoming U.S. President Trump by creating a new Arctic policy to be released by the end of the year. While the details of the new policy are not yet publicly available, Canada's government has promised to collaborate with Inuit leaders in order to create a vision for the Arctic which ensures sovereignty and security in the face of geopolitical shifts, while respecting the priorities of its Indigenous people. We'll make sure to provide updates on Canada's new vision for the Arctic in the future. On that note about Canada, Indigenous communities are already receiving significant government support, which will significantly protect their lands. On Thursday the 14th, over 20 Indigenous governments from the Northwestern Territories signed a deal with the federal government worth over $250 million. The project intends to turn almost 20% of the region into newly protected areas over the next decade, while sustaining the cultures and economies of Indigenous communities across Canada's Arctic. Similarly, the U.S. is joining in the economic support for its Arctic native peoples. On Thursday the 14th, the U.S. Department of Commerce announced $1 million of funding for 7 multi-year projects supporting climate resilience and food security in remote Alaska communities. The funding will be going to projects that hope to ensure that as the Alaskan climate changes, remote communities in the state have the tools to adapt and survive in the long term. To learn more about the projects being supported by this funding and how they will be helping Alaska Native communities, take a look at the link in the show notes. Still in the U.S., the outgoing Biden administration is making lots of impactful decisions in the Arctic, but not all are supported by Indigenous people. On Thursday the 14th, the U.S. Department of the Interior revealed that it is negotiating with Native corporations to enact a land trade that would allow a road to be built through Alaska's Eisenbeck National Wildlife Refuge. The road would connect the communities of Cold Bay and King Cove at the end of the Alaska Peninsula, allowing King Cove to be accessed more safely and reliably. While the Indigenous residents of King Cove support the deal, other Native leaders strongly oppose the project. On the 14th, the tribal government for that Yup'ik community released a statement saying the project's negative environmental impact will put all Alaskan tribes at risk. The U.S. is making deals with other Arctic nations as well. On Wednesday the 13th, American, Canadian, and Finnish officials gathered to commit to the joint development, construction, and maintenance of polar icebreakers with the signing of the Icebreaker Collaborative Effort Pact in Washington. Alejandro Mayorkas, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary, spoke at the pact signing, saying that since Russia and China are collaborating on the creation of a huge new icebreaker fleet, the U.S. and its allies need to build their own icebreakers to keep the polar regions peaceful and prosperous for all. Finland might be committing to building ships, but its environmental protection efforts are under scrutiny. Every Arctic nation is currently present at the COP29 Climate Change Conference, hoping to get support for their climate needs. Alexander Stubb, the Finnish president, spoke at the conference's opening ceremony on Tuesday the 12th, where he promised that his government would provide additional climate funding for poorer countries. However, Finnish news agency YLE responded to this speech, noting that even though the government has spent years promising lofty climate protection and investment, it actually cut its climate budget by 40% in the last year and argued that any additional funding would merely be a reinstatement of the previously cut funding. A new report by the World Wildlife Fund Arctic Program released on Monday the 11th highlighted the need for global environmental action. Despite a 6% drop in Arctic fossil fuel production in 2023, methane emissions spiked, fueling significant Arctic warming. The report criticizes Norway, the US, and Russia for planning new Arctic oil and gas projects, projecting rising emissions until 2040. It urges Arctic nations to set concrete goals for reducing production and demands immediate emission cuts from Arctic companies. Speaking of failing on environmental protections, on Tuesday the 12th, the Kremlin-linked information agency Interfax reported that the Russian government intends to withdraw from the multilateral nuclear environmental program. The program, initiated in 2003, made Norway, the European Union, and the United States provide Russia with billions of dollars of assistance to clean up nuclear fuel and radioactive waste in the Murmansk region in northern Russia. This agreement has kept nuclear pollution from entering the Arctic Ocean for decades, but Russia's desire to end all cooperation with the US and EU means that nuclear safety in the Arctic is now in serious jeopardy. Some projects being cancelled are good news, though. On Friday the 15th, Greenland's government announced that Denmark will stop using culturally inappropriate tests in parenting competence studies for Greenlandic families. Previously, tests were in the Danish language rather than Greenlandic, and parental competency was judged on westernized standards. For example, subsistence hunting is crucial to Greenlandic culture and daily life, but is considered a parental failing in Denmark. This often led to forced placements of Greenlandic children into Danish families, severing cultural ties. Greenland's government praised Denmark for addressing these concerns and implementing measures to protect Greenlandic parents' rights. Animals in the Arctic need some relief. On Friday the 15th, the Norwegian Food Safety Authority confirmed that there is a major outbreak of bird flu in North Norway. Almost 200 dead seagulls have been spotted in the Kvenangen and Skjervøy regions, many of which have been eaten by crows and rats. The Veterinary Institute says that this is the contagious H5N5 variant and has now been detected in domestic birds for the first time. Since they expect the infection to spread, they have asked members of the public who find a dead bird in northern Norway to stay clear and report the bird to authorities. Some corruption allegations have rocked the parliament in Iceland this week. On Monday the 11th, secret recordings of Jan Gunnarsson, an Independence Party MP, were leaked to the national press. These recordings allege that Gunnarsson has colluded with Bjarni Benediktsson, the Icelandic Prime Minister, to secure a position in the Icelandic government and get whaling reinstated in the long term. On Friday the 15th, Pirate Party MP Þórhildur Sunna Ævarsdóttir called for an investigation into Gunnarsson's role in the government, and her motion was passed with a majority support in Parliament. With a national election less than 2 weeks away, this explosive story may have long-lasting ramifications in Iceland. Finally, do you want to contribute to how the world views the Arctic? On Wednesday the 13th, the Arctic Economic Council launched a competition inviting people worldwide to contribute to a book called The Arctic Encyclopedia. The competition has numerous categories, including photography and poetry. Entries close on the 16th of December, and the winners will have their art added to a book that will define the Arctic. If you're interested in entering, check out the link in the show notes. And that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Before we leave, did you know that if you're listening to us on Spotify, you can leave comments or questions in the episode? There's a comment box right there. The comments are private by default, and we won't publish them. If you want us to get back to you, share your email so we can contact you back. We'd love to hear from you. Put something in there. Go crazy. Adiós.